This is a history of not only the AirRunner and how it came to be, but running in general. We want to think about the context of as far back as you possibly can around the idea of running. We'll give you a little bit of a historical context as well that leads into the mechanics, because it's important to understand how this thing does work and moves across land. But to tie in the historical point will bring us up to today as to how we use this thing most effectively. And so we'll spend just a small amount of time on that. Originally, so whatever original means, but let's just try to take yourself way back to a time where there was no such thing as a fitness coach, a gym, different kinds of resistance activities. You know, there was actually a time where none of that existed, okay? And as far back as you can think that that did exist, it didn't exist earlier than that, okay? So you want to think about what kind of capabilities did we have as humans to move across land, or to move across land at a faster rate. And that was this concept of locomotion. Bipedal, being upright, and doing it either at a slow rate to move across land, or to do it at a faster rate and to move across land as fast as possible. So you want to go back there and think about, you know, how humans are put together and see that we are essentially put together, which we'll discuss in mechanics, to do that rotation, to move across land effectively, or to do that rotation with this force going this way, force going down, and force going horizontal to actually survive. So the initial concept of us doing running or us moving at a faster than walking rate was essentially to evolve and survive, okay? So you can say to yourself, just think about it, you know, why can't we turn our head completely backwards? And why can't we, like, in a second see what's on the midpoint of our back? And why can't we run backwards just as fast as forwards? These are weird things to think about, but it makes you understand the constraints physically that we are in. We're put together for some specific things, okay? So when we were first running, and our first concept of running, we did it to survive. Now let's fast forward a number of years where there's really less of a need for moving across land or running to actually evolve and survive. Let's think about that. We get to a point now where, with changes in industry, changes in technology, changes in agriculture, this is all in a very big, broad-based period of time, we are now actually performing walking or running for leisure pursuits. Leisure could mean sports situations. Leisure could mean because we knew and figured out that, hey, we can actually do this thing, so let's just participate in it. So you can see it was actually more or less derived over a period of time outside of doing it for survival so that we could, you know, move forward. It was done actually for folly and diversion, which means that it became an opportunity for us to just play with that. Now, there's lots of positive things to playing with the concept of it, but it essentially derives us at this point of asking the real hard questions when we get into energy system training. Why are we doing it? Over time now, it's ironic that we now have moved running in multiple different ways back to a point where we have to survive. Now, have to doesn't mean that it's a definite requirement for people, but we are at a certain point in time where we don't have to do it to run and walk to survive anymore. We're not just participating in it based upon leisure because it's just specifically a pursuit. We now are at a point where we don't need to actually move whatsoever on average per day to keep things moving forward. And you may have to take a couple seconds to think really hard about that, but there's so many things around us that allow us to do less work. That's the complex issue around humans. We design things around us technologically or whatever we have in place to make this thing and how we operate here as easy as possible. The unfortunate circumstances for high percentages of people is that it means that we just do less movement. So we now walk and run, again, to improve our survival capability. We'll talk more about the energy system training on the AirRunner and how this applies overall to sustainability, and that'll help you tie into this reasoning behind why we want to actually do some exercise and do some work in the form specifically for the AirRunner. But we now are back, ironically, to a point where we have to walk and we have to run in order to allow us to move forward. Because if we don't, we stagnate and we just don't grow effectively. So that's a longer-winded story to this irony around having to walk and run, for survival instinct just for us as humans, to the point where we took advantage of it and was just a playful activity, to now to the point where we actually have to do it again to challenge ourselves because we're inside of a construct that doesn't ask us to be challenged. The major difference in what you see here with the AirRunner, it's a long story, but we went from basically only having capabilities of running on ground to this concept of putting some form of a treadmill in place, maybe 100 years ago. It could have been a little earlier than that, but it was really just an opportunity for people to not be outside and doing walking and running. The reasons for running on the treadmill that was put in place, if you want to think about it, was just to provide an opportunity as an option for people who couldn't walk or run outside, which was a great alternative. So it moved into this capability. Actually, the initial ones were not motor-driven. They were actually self-propelled, but you had to work really hard in order to propel that belt. There are still some of those models actually available today. You just got to search really hard to find them. But they were self-propelled models. The majority of them, though, moved from this, only being able to walk and run outside to this motorized version of being on a treadmill. Maybe 100 years ago, I'm going to give you a timeline based upon that. So at this point in time, we now had more than one option for walking and running. We could do it on ground, inside or outside, and we could, we could walk or run on the ground, right? Inside or outside, yeah, for sure. And then we had this motorized opportunity, so we didn't have all those variable constraints like temperature and speed and all the things to put up with when we were outside and doing walking and running. Now over time, we've got to the point where we have three bigger options, where we have this new self-propelled option, which doesn't require any electricity to run it. It is on a certain way it does, but it's based upon battery operation. But how much you move on it, like a hamster wheel, is going to provide that energy for the working piece, right? So you have this self-propelled option now today. You also have, of course, being outside in what's called in the literature overground running or walking. And you also have motorized versions. And not to get too deep into the details around this, there's positives to all of them. We're going to focus of course, for AirRunner energy system training on the AirRunner itself and provide all the positive benefits of this. But you can recognize the electrical usage, not having a specific curve to this. You could recognize that there's some things being outside, and being on ground that can provide positives and minuses as well. But we do want to understand that the self-propelled option of the AirRunner is a specifically very positive option today, and that's of course what we're going to cover for the entire AirRunner energy system training course. So in a historical concept, just to kind of get us at a ground-based support before we move into the larger technical discussion around mechanics and then energy system training and how to put all that together, it's important for you to know the whole background of the reasoning why you actually run and walk, and recognize that it has moved from a long period of time when we had to do it and actually to move our tribes around or to chase down an animal as an example. We actually had to do it to survive, to the point where we actually got complacent with this concept of walking and running. So we provide these now running in leisure pursuits, right, through play and really investigating it and wrapping science around it. Now to the point where to today, we have to be able to walk and run just to keep ourselves moving so that it provides us some physical challenges.